And then, of course, on Friday, the big news came down. Cal, Stanford, Southern Methodist on their way to the All Coast Conference. So what now? Is that going to keep Florida State and Clemson? Probably not if they could find a way to get out, add UNC to that, who guess can I can guess they feel betrayed by the Wolfpack right now. But before we get into all that and before we belabor those hypotheticals, what does the American do now that Southern Methodist has up and gone? So word on the street is they're looking the Army, at Army, bringing them into the conference on a football only setup. Of course, their basketball plays in the Patriot League along with football only conference member Navy. And then, of course, if you add Army into the conference, you have to take the Army Navy game into consideration because they usually have their standalone Saturday. So, what do you do if one of them makes the conference championship game, or what do you do if they need that standalone? Like, you're not going to move it from their December date and move it up into the season like Thanksgiving, where they have to share it with everybody else, like Florida, Florida State, Michigan, Ohio State, so on and so forth. Now, is that a move that Army's interested in making? Because the last time I remember Army joined Conference USA back in 98, stayed until about 2004, went 18-67, had a 0-win season, had 2 1-win seasons, and then, for lack of better words, they tucked tailed and said they couldn't compete. So then they went back to being an independent and haven't looked back since. So I get why Army makes sense. You already have Navy in the conference, upstate New York, it's a new market, I guess, even though, there's not really a market there unless it belongs to Syracuse. So, but from a prestige standpoint, I can understand wanting to add Army. We know the AAC tried to add San Diego State and Boise a couple of moons ago. That's probably off the table now because now we have the Tupac, Washington State, Oregon State, that I believe are going to end up in the Mountain West anyway. The AAC is probably too far east for them as far as losing the Dallas market and what money is really going to be made on the back end of that. Whereas you can regionalize with like-minded universities and a like-minded area, travel costs, because you're not going to be making what you were making in the Pac-12. So you probably need to cut down costs since you're not going to be making as much money. So now, is Army the only option out there? I say no. You got Georgia State out there from the Sun Belt, who is in the sixth biggest market in the country in Atlanta. And the only reason I bring that up is because this year, the AAC, when they expanded, they showed us how important markets were to them. They brought in, Birmingham, Charlotte, San Antonio, Houston, to replace Houston. So, market size is big to the AAC. They got New Orleans in there, so I think that Georgia State could make sense from that standpoint. Georgia State doesn't necessarily have a big football brand, but neither does, half the schools they brought in this year, but at least they have that market. They've been to 5 bowl games in the last 10 years, so they have shown somewhat of a success. We remember Ron Hunter and the basketball team with their upset in the NCAA tournament where, he tore his ACL or his Achilles, and was riding around looking like Coach Prime out there. But also, I thought about Buffalo, thinking about new markets, thinking about getting into New York because, they bring you what Army brings, but also they have a good educational system, as a state of New York university. They bring in basketball. They showed that you can be successful at Buffalo basketball. If you remember, Nate Oates and Bobby Hurley went through there. Combined together, they won 138 and 63 in a 6-year period, made 4 NCAA tournaments in that period. Buffalo football finished ranked in 2021, as recent as 2021, 2 MAC title games in the last 5 years. They've been bowling 4 out of the last 6 years. So, I think that Buffalo is probably one of the better options as far as the G5 goes, because I mean, looking at that general area, you tried the UConn thing once and they left. Basketball went back to the Big East. So is UConn willing to come back football only? You take away UConn, I'm sure you don't want UMass, because their basketball isn't even living up to their past right now. So you probably don't want them. And then the last team I thought about was Toledo. They get you close to Detroit. It's a new market as far as recruiting. You lost Ohio with Cincinnati. So you get back into that Michigan, Ohio area. They're the reigning defending MAC champions. And they've had a high football pedigree, fell a field goal short against Illinois this weekend. So, I think that that's a good choice. And then finally, just to throw a wild card out there, I know this ain't really going to happen, but, why not kick the tires on North Dakota State? I'll just leave it at that. Let me know your thoughts, please.